Welcome. I haven't done a webinar in a little while. I always love doing these. I love doing the community outreach and just kind of sharing beyond my individual one-on-one patient base, kind of the way I'm thinking about different topics. This is a great topic. I love thinking about and working with detoxification in different ways. So let's dive in. I think it's a topic that a lot of people think about and a lot of people are interested in, and I hope I will give you guys and leave you with some really useful kind of actionable tools, and frankly just a little bit more of a sophisticated way of thinking about detoxification. Okay, so let's see if we can get there. We go. Okay, so for those of you who don't know me, I'm Jennifer Lewin. I am a licensed acupuncturist and herbalist, trained in the US, licensed in the US. I have a master's degree in traditional Chinese medicine and TCM, so more Chinese style acupuncture. I also have a master's degree in Japanese style acupuncture and in herbal medicine. I practice using a model of medicine called functional medicine. So within the context of this talk, I'll be speaking a lot about functional medicine, what it is, and how it's applicable in this case, in regards to detox. So I think you'll hopefully have a decent understanding about what functional medicine means, if that's not a term you're familiar with. I also specialize in nutrition and nutritional wellness programs. I work using a pretty vast array of various hands-on, very gentle manipulative therapies within the context of something called integrative manual therapy. And then I have a bachelor's degree, my undergraduate degree, from the University of California in Santa Barbara, which I miss dearly, but I get to spend summers in California, so that's quite nice. And I've been a practicing therapist for almost 25 years, so quite a long time. So I'm hoping to kind of pull on a lot of my clinical experience and share that with you guys today. Okay, so the goals for the talk are really to share my clinical experience working with patients. I've been doing this for many, many years. And so I want to help share some of that experience with you guys in regards and relationship to detox. So we're going to talk about how to identify and how I might think about going about treating a toxic load, as well as to optimize detox pathways and kind of my thought processes and things I'm thinking about and working with when I think about optimizing detox pathways. Also to give you guys an understanding of what really root cause medicine is. And that's really within the context of a functional medicine model, and thinking about that and how it relates to both toxicity as well as optimizing our own inherent detoxification pathways. We're going to think about some kind of ways to use things like nutrition, lifestyle medicine, supplementation. How do we start to work with these issues when we find them? So how do we support detox using these various tools? And then kind of, for me, a really big important thing to leave everyone with today is really to start having you guys, again, think about detox in a much more sophisticated way. How do we think about detox from the perspective of doing it in a more ongoing, safe, and sustainable way? So a couple of just housekeeping things to begin with. I will do a Q&A at the end, but please feel free if you have kind of a burning question, or if you feel like there's a question that's immediately applicable to what I'm talking about, put it in the chat box. And if I feel like it makes sense to answer that question throughout the body of the talk, I absolutely will. Otherwise, I will go through all the chat box questions at the end, and we can have a little bit more of an open discussion. This is not, during these webinars, this is not really the context for people to talk to me about their own individual presentations or what they or their family have going on. But certainly I will leave you guys with an email address and my WhatsApp in Singapore, and we can, you can certainly take that offline with me if those are things that you want to get my input in when you're thinking about things just more for yourself or for your family. Okay. All right, so let's get right into it. Let's start talking about the functional medicine model. Okay, so functional medicine is kind of a lens that we can look through when we're thinking about examining the body, when we're thinking about treating the body. Functional medicine is a root cause medicine approach. So within this model, so this is, I'm an acupuncturist and herbalist, but I'm really a functional medicine-based acupuncturist and herbalist and manual therapist. So everything that I do in the way I think of the body, I look through this lens of functional medicine. So I'm thinking about, I want to identify, and then I want to treat in an ideal world, potentially using more natural interventions, whatever someone's underlying root causes are. So I'm going to think about and examine various systems in the body. It's a very systems-based approach. So I'm going to think about gut digestion and the microbiome and what might be going on there. I'm going to think about the immune system, maybe an inflammation and things driving that, or immune compromise and what's going on with that system. I'm going to think about detoxification, which will be a big focus of this talk. I'm going to think about our energy production system and what has to drive all the various processes or biochemistry processes in our body. I'm going to think about our communication systems. How do we communicate within ourselves? Things like our hormones and our neurotransmitters. I'm going to think about structurally our pieces of anatomy. Do we have enough blood flowing going in and out of areas? How's our, liver doing? Is it super compressed? What are our joints or our muscles or our connective tissue looking like? What is our brain doing? Our central nervous system tissue and our peripheral nervous tissue. And then I'm going to think about just lifestyle practices. What is going on with someone's diet and their nutrition, their sleep, their exercise or their movement, and their stress management. So I'm going to pull all these things together and I'm going to start investigating a lot of those things within a functional medicine model. I'm investigating using very objective measures. And I couple that with a case history. So objective measures might be blood work. They might be hormone panels. They might be stool tests. So I'm looking at objective biochemical markers as to what's going on in the body. And then I'm putting that together and implementing then a very individualized treatment plan and an integrative treatment approach, potentially bringing in and bringing together for that patient what we're finding as their individual root causes and helping them support through each of those root causes. Okay, so let's get a little bit more into kind of the topic at hand, which is detox. All right, so let's start to think about what makes one toxic. So there are two big factors when I think about toxicity. One, there has to be a toxic load. So that toxic load is going to oftentimes be a combination of endogenous toxins, compounds that are internally derived, but are just potentially too abundant, that are putting a load on our detox system. So we'll go into in the next slide exactly what those might be, but these are things like having too much insulin around, having too much glucose around, being estrogen dominant. So having too much of something that the body already produces, that puts a load on our detox system. That is considered potentially a toxic load. We also might have a toxic load coming in from exogenous toxins, things that come from kind of outside our body that are not produced in our body. So those things, again, I'll go through the list in a minute, but thinking about things like air pollution, heavy metals, mold toxicity, infections. So all those things together create potentially a toxic load. And we have to couple that with, do we have the ability to detox that load? So these are like the two really big things that I want people thinking about when we think about detox. One, is there a toxic load? If so, what is that toxic load? And two, can we detox that load? So we have a detox system. That detox system should be working. And when that detox system is working optimally, we are able to detox various things that need to be detoxed. So the more that we can optimize around the body's own ability to do detox, the less we have to deal with an overflow of toxic load. Okay, so let's again think about what are these endogenous or internally derived sources of toxic load. A lot of these things, frankly, we can just look at using basic blood work. Do we have too much hormone? So things like estrogen, testosterone, thyroid. So thyroid's a bit of a unique one because too little thyroid can make our detox system sluggish. But in this case, when we're thinking of toxic load, I'm thinking of too much estrogen, too much testosterone, too much thyroid. These are all things that could potentially put a load on our system. We also might be thinking about getting in hormones externally. So some people are taking hormones, and we don't want too much of those hormones coming in from external sources either, because again, it's just a load that needs to be detoxed. Things like high cholesterol, high triglycerides, high numbers of your various lipoproteins, those are things that need to be broken down by the body. So those can potentially build up in the system and create and be part of a toxic load. Certainly too much insulin needs to be broken down and detoxed, too much glucose. So these are all things. Various inflammatory compounds. There's been a lot of talk around COVID about a cytokine storm. So cytokines are just inflammatory compounds, and we don't want too many of them around because they put a big load on our body. So these are all examples of compounds that are produced by the body, but then also that need to be broken down in the correct way. Okay, let's look at now exogenous or externally derived toxic load. We also ideally want to test for these. We want to know, does someone have too much of some of these things? So we live in a fairly toxic world today. There's a lot of toxins around, especially environmental toxins. So it's in the air. We have air pollution. Singapore, and where I lived in Hong Kong for almost 20 years, have quite a lot of mold and mycotoxins, or the toxins that mold and mold spores give off. So it's a very common source in very hot and humid countries like Singapore and Hong Kong to potentially have a load of mold or mycotoxins. Things like pesticides, herbicides, glyphosate is a particularly nasty herbicide that causes all sorts of problems in the body, and various environmental chemicals. There's the kind of chemicals all around us. We tend to get exposed to a lot of potential toxins of things we intentionally bring into our home. So cleaning products, body products, makeup, furniture that we've brought in that are off-gassing, water that has issues, and then potential food issues. So having too much things like processed refined sugars. For some people, things like gluten and dairy can really contribute to a toxic load. If those foods aren't working for someone, things like preservatives and additives and food colorings, and again, pesticides and herbicides on so many of our foods. Alcohol. I mean, alcohol is it's quite ubiquitous around the world. And can some people detox some alcohol some of the time? Of course, but a lot of us can tend to drink more alcohol than our detox system maybe has the ability to detox on a regular basis. Alcohol is also a little bit unique insofar as it tends to get priority of being detoxed over other things. So the more we're drinking, maybe the less we're detoxing our hormones properly, or the less we're detoxing kind of other of these internally derived compounds properly. And that can be part of the problem for someone who's maybe drinking more than their body can handle. Drugs can be an issue, not so much in Singapore, but certainly prescription drugs, people who are taking a number of prescription drugs may max out, or it'll contribute to a potential load that just needs to be detoxed. I'm not saying don't take those drugs if you've been prescribed by a doctor, but certainly it's something to think about and consider, and thinking about potentially working with a doctor who can, maybe help titrate off some of those as they're maybe not needed anymore, especially if people are thinking about a more root cause medicine model and working on some of those underlying root causes. Heavy metals can be a big issue. And then infections. So certain infections let off kind of toxins. So things like H. pylori, various bacteria give off what are called lipopolysaccharides, and these LPSs can be quite toxic for the body and they have to be broken down. So various infections can create a load for the body. All right, so now if someone is potentially toxic, has too much of a toxic load, alongside has a suboptimal ability to detox that load, how might they feel? So a really common one is people feel fatigued. They feel fatigued, they don't have enough energy. So maybe that means people are over caffeinating. They feel like in order to get through their day and do what they need to do in a given day, they need to have multiple either cups of coffee or caffeine throughout the day. Or maybe they need to sleep like way more than would be kind of an acceptable amount of sleep. Most people, that's not the case. Most people are undersleeping. They're not getting enough hours of sleep. So weight gain is really common. Difficulty losing weight is really common. Mood issues are incredibly common. So sometimes mood issues present themselves in the flavor of anxiety. Sometimes it's more the flavor of depression. And sometimes it's other things. Sometimes it's overthinking and worrying and ruminating thoughts, and anger can be a common one. So mood issues can kind of run the gamut, and different people have different kind of propensities to get into, tendencies where one might go kind of a little bit more easily. All sorts of kind of mental acuity issues, things like brain fog, mental clarity, memory, focus, concentration issues, headaches, migraines. So toxicity can certainly affect the brain, the nervous system in quite an intense way. Skin issues, super common, super common. So very common, especially in children and in young children. If I see a kid who's really presenting with eczema, rashes, more skin issues, the first thing I'm thinking is what's going on with their detox system. For better or for worse, the skin is a detox organ. So if the body's other organs of detox are not doing an adequate job, doing what they need to do to help detox the load and eliminate it and get it out, we can often present with skin issues. Hormonal stuff. Hormonal dysregulation is a very common also symptom of detox. The liver plays such an important role in kind of making up the biochemical substrate of hormones. So hormones, a lot, especially the sex hormones, a lot of them are steroid-based hormones, and their backbone is cholesterol. So the liver plays a very big role there. And then the liver has to help us. It's probably one of our most major organs of detoxification. So we'll get into that a little bit later. So hormonal dysregulation is very common. And then poor stress regulation. So not being able to deal with stress or stress loads. Okay, so let's think about a lot of people. It's really quite common, frankly, for people to say, oh, I'm doing a detox, I'm doing a juice fast. And maybe they're doing it for 3 days, or maybe they're doing it for a week, or maybe they're going somewhere to do a detox. Maybe they're taking some liver cleansing herbs or some gut binders to bind up toxins, or doing a gut cleanse, or it's really common to do a dry month, to maybe just take a month off of alcohol. And it's not that any of those things are bad. They're absolutely not bad. They're good to do some of the time. But what I would say in general, and where I want your thinking to go around detox, again, in this more sophisticated model, is if we go and do a detox for a couple of days or even a month, if we never think about, can our body's detox system actually adequately detox and process and eliminate those toxins? If we're going to start trying to pull toxins out of hiding and detox them, but if that detox system is overwhelmed or underpowered because it doesn't have the right nutrients, it doesn't have the B vitamins and the magnesium and the various kind of vitamins and minerals and amino acids it needs to do detox, then those toxins can come out of hiding. They can, maybe course through the bloodstream for a little bit. And if we can't process them and eliminate them, they're just going to go right back into hiding. So for me, this is one of the main problems. So I don't like, and I don't recommend most people push detox until they've really worked on and upregulated their detox system. And it's also really helpful to know what you're detoxing. So again, going back to these kind of two things, how do we detox in an ongoing, safe, and sustainable way? We want to identify and treat the toxic load or toxic loads, and we want to support the body's own ability to do detox. And ideally, we're supporting the body's own ability to do detox optimally. So we need to identify what the toxic loads are, and then we need to think about what are an individual's underlying root causes that might be prohibiting them from really doing detox, from their body's own ability to doing detox. So we're going to talk a lot about what are these underlying root causes. But before we get into that, I want to just help you guys think a little bit through, how do we think about identifying the toxic load? How do we know what's going on? So I want to generally work through kind of these functional medicine-based lab tests. Functional medicine really shines in this realm of let's identify what are potentially the problems. And then a lot of these tests can also give us a sense of how well we're detoxing. So we want to identify through these testing what the toxic loads might be, and then what's our detox capability. So oftentimes I start with basic blood work. I usually interface with a lot of medical doctors that I work with who kind of help run the blood work. I want to look at oftentimes things like a stool panel, or think about, there's a breath test I work with called a SIBO test that might give us a sense of what's going on from the perspective of gut infections. I want to think about maybe if someone has food irritations and if that might be contributing to a load. This test called the OAT test, or the urinary organic acids test, is an amazing test because it gives me a really good sense of what's going on. Is someone able to detox more optimally? There's a lot of kind of functional markers of detox on this panel, and it also gives me a sense of a lot of their nutrient deficiencies, as well as their mitochondrial health, which can you produce the energy needed to detox? I might look at heavy metal panels or environmental panels or mold panels. I'm going to talk a little bit about DNA and genetic issues and where they come in, but that can absolutely be very important, especially when I see either very complicated cases or if I'm seeing kids who I think have a toxic load. It's really important to know then how much of that is being driven by just they were dealt a suboptimal hand genetically with regards to their detox pathways. I certainly want to look at hormones. This is a really big, important piece. Sex hormones. So again, really common to have either too much estrogen, too much testosterone, too much cortisol or stress hormone as a contributing factor to toxic load. And it also gives me a sense of, there are some of these organic acid markers on the Dutch panel. So oftentimes I can kind of pull a Dutch panel and look at that to get a sense of what's going on hormonally, plus a little bit of detox. And then viral and bacterial load blood work. So those are all important. So this is kind of a lot of my tools, and I'm coupling these tools with a very comprehensive case history to get a sense of really what is going on for an individual. Okay, so next I want to get into when we're thinking about, can someone actually detox? Whatever their toxic load is, do they have the ability to detox it? What is their body's own ability to do detox? And there's a lot of different patterns, but I've kind of pulled out what I think are the most common and kind of salient ones to go through with you guys. So you can start to get a sense of how many different things can be kind of playing into why someone might not be detoxing optimally. So first, to know that these patterns are not mutually exclusive. You can have all 7 of them together. You might have 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 or 7. They also know that all of these patterns, when they're there, contribute to chronic inflammation. So too much inflammation in and of itself can be a contributor to why someone is toxic and toxic load. Okay, so let's get into genetics. So the first 2, genetics and nutrient deficiencies, are really kind of go together, because in order to run a lot of our gene pathways, we need various nutrients to be in abundance in the body. So we have where to pull from for various kind of biochemical processes to work properly and to be optimal. So I'm going to think in this context of this talk about genetic issues in the context of detox. So certainly methylation and methylation related genes. Some of you may have heard of the gene MTHFR. It's a really common gene that's being tested more and more. And if people have, from a genetic perspective, we get one copy of a gene from our mother, one copy of a gene from our father. So we might have one well-functioning copy and one, one copy that doesn't function so well. So that would be a heterozygous presentation. If we have two copies of a gene that don't function so well, that's called a homozygous presentation. So especially when people have two poor functioning genes within the context of methylation, they may require much higher levels of certain nutrients in order for that gene to do what it needs to do. So various genes, the methylation genes, your phase 1 and your phase 2 liver detox genes, and frankly, any other detox related genes, they need certain vitamins and minerals to function. So whatever enzyme they are making, in order for that, whatever that gene is doing, for it to follow through with what it needs to be doing, we need these cofactors of vitamins and minerals. So MTHFR requires a lot of these methylation B vitamins, so especially folate, which is B9. So someone who has an MTHFR variation might need really high levels of folate in order to get a more maximal ability for that gene to do what it does. And it's just, in order to detox properly, we need to be able to methylate properly. So the methylation genes require generally various B vitamins, B2, B6, B9, which is folate, B12, which is cobalamin, and COMT, which is another gene I have up here, is a magnesium dependent gene. So we need that gene, the MTRR, we need B12. So there's various nutrients that play into whether our genes are functioning properly. We can also get a sense genetically if we do these various phases of liver detox kind of quickly or slowly, and this can cause backups in our system. And sometimes we have gene deletions in our detox pathways. So the genetics really give me a sense, or someone who practices functional medicine, when we're thinking about long-term, how we might need to support and upregulate someone's own ability to do detox. So again, I'm thinking about looking at genes in kids and younger people who might have issues, because we want to know, how do we help support them longer term? And for more complicated adults, it's often a piece of their clinical picture. Okay, so again, nutrient deficiencies in the genetics really play a big role, but nutrients, there's also a gut component when we think about nutrients. So if gut is not working well, sometimes that's the reason why we're not getting enough nutrients. So in general, I'm thinking about, in order to run our detox pathways, I certainly need those B vitamins, so I can do something called methylation, which is required to detoxify optimally. I need B vitamins, magnesium, things like zinc and selenium and other minerals. I might need vitamin D or other vitamins. And all of these things, sometimes when I'm thinking about detoxing across a biochemical pathway, in order for step 1 to turn into step 2, to turn into step 3, to turn into step 4, the body needs to pull in these vitamins and minerals. So that's what a cofactor is. It helps move us along the biochemical chain. So when we're thinking about detoxing optimally, we really need these vitamins and minerals. So, and it's really common in today's nutritional environment and nutritional system and soil environment that we're growing our foods in, to have suboptimal nutrients. So a lot of people really benefit from supplementing. It would frankly be amazing if we could get all the vitamins and minerals and antioxidants from the food we eat. But even people who are eating an incredibly nutrient dense, perfect diet, let's say, still struggle in today's food environment with getting enough nutrients in. So nutrient deficiencies are incredibly common, especially the B vitamins, especially magnesium, especially vitamin D, especially your omega-3 fatty acids, and then proteins. We need proteins, and we'll see that a little bit more when we get into the liver detox pathways and what's required. But in order to do what's called phase 2 liver detox, we need amino acids, and amino acids are the building blocks of protein. So we need to make sure we're getting enough protein in. Okay, so the third pattern that I want to talk about and have you guys think about is the gut and the digestive system. So a very common underlying root cause contributing to someone's ability to not detox optimally is having gut issues. We really want, so normalizing that gut ecosystem is really essential, incredibly essential for detox. So the way I kind of think about it is there's 3 main determinants of gut health. The gut microbiome, those are like the good, healthy bacteria in your gut. Whether or not we have gut infections or overgrowths. So do we have things like candida or fungal overgrowth, bacterial overgrowth, parasitic issues? Those are all considered potential gut infections or overgrowths. Now, we have a lot of bacteria in our gut. It's a very bacteria-rich community, and some of those are considered kind of really healthy, good bacteria. And a lot of those are considered what are called commensal. So those commensal or opportunistic bacteria, they're also called. Those are like, I kind of think about those as the weeds in our garden. So it's okay to have some weeds in our garden, but if the gut ecosystem, it's like, you know, the garden that you might plant outside your house. If that gut ecosystem becomes unbalanced and you don't have enough of the healthy plants and flowers growing in the right ratios, then we can have an overgrowth of the weeds in our garden. And we don't want to have too many weeds overgrowing and overtaking the healthy plants and flowers. But that is one of the things that can happen that can disrupt this gut ecosystem, and this would be called dysbiosis. The other thing we really want to think about when we're thinking about gut is gut permeability, or some of you might have heard of a term called leaky gut. So the gut tube, you can almost think of it as a separate tube from the rest of the body. And we don't want to have little micro tears in our gut lining, because even if things are normal and healthy inside the gut, if those same things find their way outside of the gut, like maybe broken down parts of fats or carbohydrates or proteins, those find their way out of the gut, then the bloodstream's right there with all sorts of immune cells. And then the body's immune system can start to mount a defense against it. And that causes that can lead to and contribute to so many of like our food issues and our food intolerances. And then some of those issues can affect also brain and nervous system. So that gut lining is really quite closely associated with the blood-brain barrier. So these are kind of these linings that separate different parts of our body. And so these systems of our barriers are really connected. We kind of know quite clearly from good scientific research that when you have an injury to your blood-brain barrier, it can often cause an injury to your gut barrier and vice versa. So there's a lot of relationship there. So again, we don't like things. And then toxins from bacteria in the gut can get into the bloodstream and cause a load more systemically in the body. These lipopolysaccharides are a really common one that can find their way out. So we don't want things leaking out of the gut barrier and getting into the bloodstream. So we also, when we're thinking about gut, we got to think about, it's a major source for elimination of toxins and waste. So if the gut's not working properly, if we're constipated, if we're not eliminating properly, how do we get things out? So in order for the detox systems to work, we have to process those toxins, but we also have to eliminate those toxins. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the gut plays a vital role for nutrient absorption. So if the gut's not working well, if it's imbalanced, if that gut ecosystem is imbalanced, oftentimes we're not getting optimal nutrient absorption, which again, we need those nutrients to drive our detox pathways. So you're starting to see how everything's kind of like works together and how these patterns are not mutually exclusive. Here's a really good picture, I think, of just the gut barrier. So here is the gut lumen, the inner lining of the gut. And then we have this kind of barrier. These are these kind of the gut lining, the gut wall. So this is inside the gut. This is the gut lining. And these gut cells should have these nice tight junctions, these kind of black lines here between these kind of orangey looking cells should have these nice tight linings so things don't leak out. So you see here from the gut lining, you see a channel. When we have a leakiness or a permeability, things can leak out. Things like good healthy bacteria or food antigens or bacteria or toxins can leak out of the gut. And then here's the bloodstream where you have all sorts of immune cells just kind of ready to pounce on that, thinking like, ooh, that's a foreign invader. This is not supposed to be in the bloodstream. Let me mount an immune response against that. And then this is how people end up with kind of food intolerances when the immune system starts to react and make reactivity against potential food-based kind of particles or antigens. Okay, so one of my favorite objective tests that I look at for gut and looking at the gut ecosystem is called the GI map. I like to run it alongside a marker called zonulin, so you can do a regular GI map or a GI map with zonulin. This is a DNA-based stool test. And I love this test for just giving me very objective data points on, here's an example of, these are toxins and DNA evidence that there's certain bacteria in this person's gut that just shouldn't be there. This page is about what are the things that frankly should never be in the gut. Things like maybe salmonella or certain strains of E. coli or C. difficile or giardia are just never meant to be there. So in this example, we're seeing high levels of the toxins let off by C. difficile, which is quite a nasty gut bacteria. This test will also help me look at fungi, yeast overgrowth, viruses, parasites, worms, H. pylori, and all the potential toxins that H. pylori can give off, which in this sample, you have a lot of positive H. pylori toxins, as well as does someone have adequate levels of the good, healthy, normal bacterial flora? So again, a lot of really important markers there. This test also gives me markers of intestinal health. Can someone break down, do they have too much fat in their stool? How's their gallbladder working? Can that help break down the fats that they're eating in their diet? Are they making enough pancreatic enzymes to help break down foods adequately? This is an enzyme that it plays a really important role for helping us break down a lot of our hormones. So this is a particularly important marker. When this enzyme is high, it gives me an indication that we might not be breaking down our hormones as adequately in the body. Do we have blood in the stool? What's our immune system looking like? Vis-a-vis whatever infectious load we have going on. So do we have kind of too much immune system or too little immune system reactivity in relationship to what someone might have going on in their gut? How inflamed they might be. And then this zonulin, I always add this in because this is a good marker of intestinal permeability. So this is a really important one. Zonulin is the chemical mediator. It is what helps pull those two gut cells apart. So we know that certain things and certain environments can make it so we have more gut permeability. So zonulin is a really important marker to look at. Gluten in particular upregulates zonulin. So gluten, in my opinion, is never a food you want to do too much of. And I think most people benefit from taking it out, frankly, because it can create an environment of leaky gut or gut permeability, which has so many knock-on effects that ideally we really don't want. Can some people, though, eat some gluten some of the time? Of course, within the context of the individual always, but it is a generally problematic food for many, many, many people. Okay, let's look at now a little bit with the organs of detox, because these are really important. So we can detox optimally. So the liver is probably the biggest by just, well, the skin's probably the biggest by volume, but the liver is a huge organ that plays such an important role for detox. So you've been hearing me talk about phase 1 and phase 2 liver detox during this talk. So the way I kind of think about it and kind of try and break it down for patients is toxin comes into the liver. That toxin now has to be pulled apart into its component parts. That's what phase 1 liver detox does. So at the end of phase 1, oftentimes we're left with even more volatile and more reactive parts than potentially the whole toxin as a whole was. But we need to break it apart so then phase 2 can come in and it can package it up quite nicely into these kind of, I almost think of it as like, you're wrapping a present and putting a bow on it. So now you need phase 2 to kind of make all those little volatile pieces more safe. And then we need the gallbladder to let out bile. Sometimes we think of this as phase 3. So the gallbladder has to let out bile, and then all the fat soluble stuff has to go out through the gut with the help of bile from the gallbladder to go out through the bowels. The water soluble pieces get shunted over to the renal system, where the kidneys might do some processing and let out through the urine. So we need the liver to be able to do phase 1 and 2 liver detox. We need the gallbladder to let out bile. We need the kidneys and the renal system to be working. We need the gut to eliminate. So all those things need to be happening in order for us to process and detox things. So where I think a lot of people go wrong when they think, oh, let me do a detox, let me do a juice fast, let me, give myself a bunch of, liver detox herbs. A lot of those things are upregulating phase 1 liver detox. So you just start doing phase 1 faster. But what if you can't package it up nicely? What if your gallbladder's not working? What if your gut can't eliminate? What if your kidneys are having problems? So a lot of there is a time and a place to push detox, without a doubt. Lots of people do need to push detox if they have quite a major toxic load. But in my opinion, the much safer way to do detox is to start to get your body's own ability to detox to work properly first. Make sure phase 1 and phase 2 liver detox are working well. Make sure the gallbladder is working well. Make sure the gut ecosystem is in balance and isn't sick and can eliminate properly. Make sure the kidneys and the renal system are working well. So we really want to get all these things dialed in. Now, the skin and the lung are also detox organs. So we do let out stuff through our sweat, through our skin. We do exhale things through our lungs and through the lung system. We get rid of carbon dioxide all the time that could potentially build up and become a toxic load. But what I see a lot with skin is people run into skin issues, skin rashes, eczema, when these other parts of the detox system are not working well, frankly, when these other really important organs of detox, the liver, the gallbladder, the kidneys, the gut, we got to get those right. And sometimes the liver is just not working well because genetically, we kind of got dealt a bad hand. And you might have a number of genetic SNPs relating to how well you do phase 1, phase 2. So a really common genetic pattern is someone has fast phase 1, so they're pulling apart toxins quite quickly, and slow phase 2 genetically. So they don't package them up so nicely. So you end up with a lot of these kind of volatile intermediate processes metabolites as things have been pulled apart. And that can be a real burden for people. So when we're thinking about the toxin comes in, again, that toxin can be any number of things. It can be things that we make in our body that needs to be broken down, like hormones, like insulin and glucose, like cholesterol, triglycerides, those types of things. It can be infections or infection toxins. It can be contaminants or pollutants. It can be things like herbicides and pesticides, herbicides, additives, preservatives, food coloring, drugs, alcohol, all those things need to be detoxed. So we need to, again, go through phase one. We need to pull apart the toxin into its component parts. We require nutrients to run our phase one detox pathways. We need our B vitamins. So a B complex is really important for a lot of people. They just can't detox they can't run their detox pathways without having those Bs. Glutathione is incredibly important. So glutathione, I almost think about it as it helps start to neutralize some of these toxins and keep people safe. So N-acetylcysteine, or NAC, is the precursor to glutathione. It's something that we produce in our body, but a lot of people benefit from taking glutathione externally, and it can help as we upregulate the glutathione system in the body. It can be extremely helpful to help people process their toxins and adequately work their phase one liver detox. So some people have slow phase one liver detox, which also isn't good. And other kind of vitamins that are an antioxidant. So things like vitamin E can be important. Vitamin C can be important. Milk thistle can be a good herb. But if someone has too fast phase one liver detox, which we can see through a genetic panel, you sometimes don't want to give them more of these things, which is why people can get in trouble when they're taking some of these liver cleansing herbs, because sometimes we upregulate phase one just far too much, especially if people are struggling with phase two. So as a clinician, I've learned from many mentors that I've worked with is you want to start with phase two most of the time, because that's what keeps people safe. So in order to run our phase two, that's that packaging up in a safe way. If we know we are doing a good job with phase two liver detox, I'm then not as worried about starting to upregulate phase one. So for protein is really important. So most of the required nutrients for phase two, they're various amino acids, which are breakdown products of protein. So I want to make sure my patients are eating adequate amounts of protein. The animal-based proteins tend to be more bioavailable in the amount of amino acids that they kind of give off to the body. But certainly if someone is vegetarian or vegan, no problem, we can still upregulate their amino acid production, but we just want to do it for a lot of people in a very mindful way and make sure they're having enough protein. I tend to recommend protein at all meals. Sometimes that means just adding a good quality protein powder or maybe an amino acid powder into some of those meals that people might not be getting adequate amounts of protein. And that's a fine way to do it as well. Oftentimes I'm using supplements to also get in the right things so people can have enough of what they need to run these detox pathways. And then the cruciferous vegetables are great. So your broccoli, your kale, your cauli, your Brussels sprouts, kind of your bok choy, all those cruciferous help upregulate phase two, as do your allium. So your onion, your garlic, your shallot, your leeks, stuff like that. Okay. And then we need to be able to eliminate with the gallbladder's help, with the gut's help, with the kidneys and renal system help. Okay. Insulin, really common when people have too much insulin dysregulation. Their cells become kind of insensitive to insulin. We have an insulin sensitivity issue. You can have loads of insulin just floating around. Very easy to test through bloods, through just regular bloods. Check a fasting insulin and check a fasting glucose and see, do we have too much of these around? So insulin is the key that opens kind of the cell to bring glucose into the cell to be used so we can help make energy. It's one of the pathways. It's not the only pathway to make energy, but it's one of them. So certainly too much glucose hanging around, too much insulin hanging around can contribute to a toxic load. It needs to be broken down. we can totally control this by diet. So diet is probably the biggest thing that we need to get to here. So making sure that people are modifying diet and their carbohydrate intake according to what's going on with insulin and blood sugar. We can also have someone consider wearing a continuous glucose monitor. In Singapore, you can pick it up at Watson's or Guardian, and it can be a great informative tool to know, based on what you are eating, how is your glucose responding? And if you're peaking, are you going back down? I prefer what I call the slow burning high fiber carbs that kind of bring your glucose up slowly and drop you down slowly. It can be really helpful for many people to switch to those types of carbs. And those are your things like sweet potato, pumpkin, squash, lotus root, taro root, beetroot, a lot of your kind of root veggies and starchy tubers can be a really good shift for people, and getting some of those other refined grains and other processed sugars out of their diet. Okay, so hormones, I also alluded to this as can be an issue from an underlying root cause. We certainly want to look at thyroid and thyroid hormone, because again, a sluggish thyroid or hypothyroid means everything slows down, including how we run our detox pathways. Too much thyroid hormone might contribute to a load of things we have to detox. Things like estrogen dominance or testosterone excess certainly can create this internal load that we have to detox. Estrogen dominance has become a huge issue in today's modern day kind of chemical environment. There's a lot of what are called phytoestrogens kind of hanging around in the environment. They're in our makeup, they're in our body products, they're in our plastics, things that kind of look like estrogen and can bind to the estrogen receptor and can dysregulate estrogen in our body. So estrogen dominance, kind of too much estrogen in relationship to testosterone, not only does it put a load on a detox system, but it completely can throw us off hormonally. So we want to look at this. What are our hormone levels through blood and through a Dutch panel? The Dutch panel is amazing though, because it also tells us how are we breaking down our hormones? What are our metabolites of estrogen and testosterone breakdown? What are those looking like? The Dutch panel also gives us an amazing sense about sex hormone. Sorry, not sex hormone, stress hormone. So do we have too much cortisol, and how are we clearing our cortisol? How are our adrenals looking? So these are some examples on a Dutch panel. This is an example of too much of the wrong type of an androgen breakdown product, a testosterone breakdown product. This person in this example might have a more PCOS presentation. And this is estrogen dominance, high estrogen in relationship to progesterone. This is on a Dutch panel, how we are breaking down our estrogens. So this person is not breaking down their estrogens properly. They have far too much shunting down this 16-OH pathway. This is not ideal. The Dutch panel also gives us functionally an idea of how well someone is methylating their hormones. Are they breaking them down in the right way via this COMT gene, which is a magnesium-dependent gene? This Dutch panel also gives us, here's a good example of high free cortisol and low cortisol clearance. So this person needs to break down all this extra cortisol and is going to feel super stressed and is not going to feel good because they have so much cortisol coursing through their bloodstream and in their body. Okay, so the last, I believe, underlying root cause we're going to look at is just mitochondrial dysfunction. So mitochondria are those little powerhouses in your cells, if you remember back to high school biology, that create units of ATP or energy. So when we have mitochondrial dysfunction, which a lot of things can contribute to that, but certainly too much of a toxic load can bog down our production. Too much of an infectious load can bog down our production of cellular energy. And when if we have a big toxic load, we require a lot of cellular energy to detox that load. We need to fuel all our pathways to break down our toxins properly. So mitochondrial dysfunction really is an issue kind of on both ends of helping us break down things and fuel our detox pathways, as well as just if we have too much of a toxic load, we oftentimes can't make enough kind of cellular energy. So we need to potentially support the mitochondria. I often look at a urinary organic acid test to know what is someone's kind of, what is their mitochondria function looking like? Okay, so now let's get into what do we do about all this? I think to support detox in an ongoing, safe, and sustainable way, the first place to start is with diet. This is kind of what we do all day, every day. So this is an amazing place to start. So let's start with a basic premise. We want to eat real food. So that's kind of foundationally, that's where we can start. Things that we might be eating that could be hurting our detox system: refined and processed carbohydrates and sugars, preservatives, additives, food coloring, too much of these things. What should we be eating to support detox? Again, just real food: fruits, veggies, legumes, good quality protein, nuts and seeds, healthy starchy tubers like sweet potatoes, again, a lot of your kind of root veg. These things all support our detox system. Again, emphasis on cruciferous: broccoli, cauli, kale. If you can break those down, you don't have an oxalate problem. Again, we want to use the easy thing. This is like, for most people, it can be really daunting to think about starting with diet, but it is so incredibly impactful. I tell patients all the time, like, there's no way to kind of really realize how important getting your diet dialed in properly is for overall health and wellness, including detox. Most people far underestimate. So if we can get this right, it helps a lot of other things fall into place. So nutritionally, I want to think about eating good quality whole foods and in good quality, sometimes that means, a lot of the time that could mean organic, because we want to ideally get rid of the herbicides and the pesticides on the foods we're eating. And it's unfortunate, but that is the current environment, the current food environment. Certainly, if you can't afford organic, if you don't have access to organic, make sure you have good food and veggie washes. There's even some good kind of cheap do-it-yourself stuff. Just look on Pinterest for how do you make kind of an at-home food and veggie wash. Otherwise, we have great stuff here at Balanced Living. There's some good stuff that you can get out there in the market. Scoop has, iHerb has. So all of those are options. Good quality protein, really essential. Most people far undereat and don't meet their protein requirements. In order to run our detox pathways, especially that phase 2 liver detox, we need protein. We need the amino acids, the breakdown products of protein. So think about eating enough protein at each meal. Good quality fats at each meal. Certainly, if you have a gallbladder problem, you need to get that sorted. The gallbladder helps us emulsify or break down our fats by producing bile that gets led into the gut. But fats are really important, especially if we're going to start to think about shifting our carbs to these more slow burning different types of carbs. We can make energy substrate from glucose coming from carbs and or from fats. So ideally, we want to kind of become like a hybrid car, where some of the time we can make units of energy from our fats, and some of the time we can make units of energy from our carbs, breaking down to glucose. And we want to be able to kind of go back and forth between those, really be a hybrid car. So eating small to moderate amounts of the right kinds of carbs, especially for lunch and dinner. I like to take a lot of the carbs out of breakfast because it's a great way to just set your insulin curve for the day and your stress hormone for the day. So I try and have people eat a lot more of their carbs for lunch and dinner. Lots of multicolored veggies, thinking about your antioxidants, thinking about your vitamins and minerals. So 1/2 to 2/3 of each of our plates as veggies. Again, an emphasis on cruciferous veggies, an emphasis on the alliums. Both of those help with that, supporting that phase 2 liver detox. Your alliums are your onions, garlic, shallot, leeks, those types of things. Minimal to maybe no processed refined foods, thinking about certainly getting the processed refined like junk foods out, but even thinking about, does an individual need to get the processed refined sugars out and or the processed grains out of their diet? And sometimes we even need to take whole grains out of our diet. So, again, I'm a fan of, in general, focusing more of the carbs on your non-grain carbs. Then for some people, they need to eliminate certain foods because those foods can contribute to a toxic load for them. So gluten is a big one, which gluten often creates this kind of leaky gut environment and can be a very potent kind of toxin almost as it gets out into the bloodstream. So the immune system can react quite strongly to it. I tend to see a lot of brain issues in and around gluten. So people tend to feel very good from a brain, mental acuity, brain fog, memory, focus, concentration, headaches, migraines. Most people just feel sharper when they get gluten out. So certainly that gluten protein must be finding its way out of the gut and into the brain. Dairy can be an issue for some people. Certainly the processed refined sugars, thinking about insulin and blood sugar for that individual, and maybe there's lots of different potential inflammatory foods. That's where working with a practitioner to find what those might be for you is really helpful. Our water supply can be really suboptimally optimal. We have certainly like fluoride and chlorine are in most, like if you're drinking tap water, I definitely recommend getting water filters and getting rid of potential toxins, but a lot of other stuff that we might have to detox can be in our water. So definitely using water filters. Balanced Living has the Epic filters, which are great. I really like the Berkey filters, which are easy to get in Singapore. And there's various companies. Some people, the reverse osmosis can be helpful, but it can take out a lot of the minerals. So thinking about that and then getting rid of refined vegetable oil. So definitely getting rid of the canola, sunflower, safflower, rice bran, corn, soy, peanut, getting rid of all of those oils and focusing on good, healthy fats and good, healthy oils like extra virgin olive oil, avocado oil, ghee is a really good one. Duck fat can be a really good one. Butter can be good if someone's eating dairy. Coconut oil is amazing. So focusing on those fats, the non-inflammatory. So these foods, we want to focus on them because we want to optimize the vitamins and minerals and nutrients and antioxidants we're getting from our food. So we want nutrient-rich and nourishing foods. We will have better blood sugar control. We will help feed our good, healthy bacteria. We'll have better weight control. It'll help us make, good energy throughout the day. So ideally, we're not having to caffeinate. It'll help our liver and our detox systems. We'll sleep better, help us balance our hormones. So in general, like eating this way just helps people feel better pretty much on every level, including around mood. Okay, so generally I would say when you're thinking about starting to make changes with your food, with your diet, start with the low-hanging fruit, like start with the stuff that's easiest to take out. So we want to identify and eliminate the sources of toxins. Some of those, like if you have a mold and mycotoxin load, you might have to work with someone like me, someone who does functional medicine, to help you detox that. Or if you have a heavy metal load, or if you have, chronic infections or gut infections. But some of this stuff can be quite easy. Clean up your diet, get as much kind of organic as possible, using, fruit and veggie washes, make sure you're drinking clean water, get natural cleaning products into your house. We have control over what we put in our mouth and what we put on our body and the chemicals we bring into our home. Start there. It's a great place to start. So body products are a huge one for women. There is no regulation in the world of makeup and body products. So all sorts of nasty chemicals, a lot of those are endocrine disruptors, affect our hormones. So moving to clean brands of makeup, clean brands of body products, clean brands of cleaning products, get the chemical, the kind of those nasty, like chemical-based ones out of your house and don't put them on your body. Certainly if you have, teenagers and teenage girls in particular, really teach them about making good choices around their body products and their makeup. women and girls are slathering their bodies, their faces with all sorts of chemicals all the time. Alcohol is a huge one. So many people are winding down at the end of the day with alcohol. So many people are over drinking on the weekends. So just being much more mindful. Some people need to cut out alcohol totally for a while, get their detox systems upregulated. Again, alcohol tends to get priority when we think about detox. So it can make it so it's very hard to fix a hormone problem if you have too much of a hormone, because alcohol is getting detoxed as a priority. So being very mindful about when we drink, how much we drink. Alcohol is really important when we're thinking about weight loss. Also, it kind of puts the pause on fat burning for up to 4 days. So, if that's a goal for someone, thinking about changing their alcohol habits can be really helpful. Drugs are kind of a different issue. Recreational drugs are not really an issue in Singapore. They can be an issue in other countries. So just thinking about that, and again, potentially working with a doctor and or with someone like me as well. But if you're thinking about you're on a bunch of prescription drugs and you want to start to think about working on some of these underlying root causes, and then thinking about, can you titrate off working with a doctor? That could potentially be something to work with. Getting the plastics out of your home, never heating in plastics, thinking about working with infection. So just, again, start with the easiest things first. Supplements. How might we think to supplement around detox? Oftentimes, we just want to start with the basics. So things like omega-3s, things like getting your B vitamins in, getting your vitamin D levels optimized, making sure you have magnesium in, making sure the zinc levels and the selenium levels. A lot of people need to add in either N-acetylcysteine or NAC, NAC, or glutathione. Probiotics, making sure we have enough electrolytes, enough, I like some of the green powders, because a lot of us just aren't eating enough greens. So they can be almost like your insurance policy. Are you getting enough of the greens in? Because a lot of those good, healthy greens can be giving us like food-based sources of our vitamins and minerals and antioxidants. So it's always great when we can do things food-based. Food-based is very hard to do, though, when you're trying to get to therapeutic levels. It's amazing, though, for maintenance levels. So if we need to work with someone really has toxic loads and or they have suboptimal ability to detox, oftentimes they need therapeutic levels of certain things for a while. But certainly we can add in food-based ways on top of that. And then someone might need very specialized support. So that's going to be very according to the individual, whether they need support with phase 1 liver detox, phase 2 liver detox, gut support, blood sugar support, adrenal support, hormonal support, mitochondrial support, inflammatory support. So all of that can be really helpful and useful. And it's going to be just according to kind of what I'm finding objectively, what's going on in the case history. And then I want to think about lifestyle factors. So sleep is really kind of, for me, neck and neck with diet. We need to get our sleep right. So getting enough sleep. Matthew Walker is a really great resource for thinking about things like sleep hygiene and understanding what happens when we sleep. So the body kind of cleans house when we sleep. It helps us heal when we sleep. So we want to be going in and out of our sleep cycles properly. Alcohol and caffeine do not help us do that. They inhibit us from going in and out of our sleep cycles properly. So if someone's really trying to heal, we need to sleep, and we're trying to help their body get to a better place, or I'm trying to help them get their body to a better place. Sleep is kind of non-negotiable. So aiming for that kind of 8 hours or so. It's kind of like 7 to 9 hours for most people. But if I want people to give themselves at least an 8-hour sleeping window most of the time. We want to get movement in. So we want to get movement and exercise, ideally on a daily basis. Weight training is ridiculously important, incredibly important, especially when we're thinking about kind of insulin blood sugar control. It helps a lot with the clearance of those things to have good, adequate muscle mass. we also need to get enough of the protein in order to build our muscle mass. So muscles play a really big, important role. So I'm really kind of encouraging everyone to not only just move and exercise, but also to start thinking about weight training, especially for women as they're moving into their perimenopausal and menopausal years. It's essential that kind of we maintain muscle mass and keep up with exercise in that respect. Thinking about stress management, there's a lot of different ways to think about this and do this, and some people need a lot more of this than others. Thinking about taking time every day to get yourself into a parasympathetic, a kind of rest and restore mode. So that can be all sorts of different things. That might be reading a relaxing book. That might be taking a bath. That might be intimacy. That might be meditation or mindfulness. That might be gentle yoga. That might be taking a walk after dinner. That might be, spending time with people that you enjoy spending time with. It can look, there's so many different ways that this can look. It can be journaling. We want to think about eliminating the sources of toxic load. So that can be really important when we're thinking about mold and mycotoxin or, herbicide, pesticides, food-based stuff. So again, we control the things that we can control easily. And sometimes we need a practitioner to help support us to eliminate those sources. And then what else does someone need? Do they need things like kind of acupuncture? When I'm thinking in this more integrative treatment approach model, do they need acupuncture? Do they need dry needling? Do they need some hands-on work, some manual therapy to work on the structural parts of their body? Do they need different types of body work? Do they need energy work? Do they need psychotherapy? So kind of bringing these other pieces around. And again, it's really going to vary based on the individual. Okay, so my last slide is just really a summary. Just when we're thinking about detox, I want you to start thinking about this in a much more sophisticated way, thinking about identifying and treating toxic load and thinking about really optimizing your body's own ability to do detox, making sure that the liver can do phase 1 and phase 2, making sure you have the nutrients and the genetic potential to do these, making sure that the gallbladder is working properly and can let out bile in the right way, making sure your gut is healthy and it can eliminate things, making sure your kidneys and your renal system are healthy. If your skin is starting to get overwhelmed with rashes or eczema, let's, start to work on your body's own ability to detox. So change your diet, optimize around diet and nutrition, optimize around sleep, think about stress management, think about exercise and movement, especially lifting weights and working on your muscles, and then eliminating the exposure to toxic loads as much as you can. Again, start with the low-hanging fruit, clean up your water, clean up your food. If you see mold, there's some great people in Singapore who can go through your house and identify, is there mold in your environment, in your house, and they can help you clean it. They can teach you to do it. They can do it. They can do mold remediation. Just know that lifestyle changes happen faster than you think for a lot of people. Like, I love putting people on what I call like a 30-day anti-inflammatory dietary reset. Oftentimes that's enough time to start making these really big habitual changes in lifestyle, in diet, in sleep, in stress management, in movement. Sometimes it takes longer, but that's okay. Like, I want people to be in this for the long game. We don't want, ideally, if we're detoxing in an ongoing, safe and sustainable way, hopefully we will never build up such a major toxic load that it makes us really sick. So that's how I want you to think about detox. To make these changes with a friend, make these changes with a partner or a spouse, make these changes within your home environment with your kids. It's fun, and it can be so much easier for everyone to kind of do it as a group, do it as a team, run the lab tests, run them with a practitioner like someone like myself to know what's going on with you if you are symptomatic or you suspect that there's something going on with your detox system. And then really get supported by a practitioner. I'm here in Singapore. I also do Zoom. I work with people kind of around the world via Zoom as well. So just get supported by myself or another functional medicine practitioner. This model of medicine is still not, incredibly ubiquitous, but there's a lot more of us kind of doing this. So find someone to work with that you're comfortable with, to do this kind of work and start to kind of dig into what do you need? What are your toxic loads? And what is going on with your body's own ability to do detox? And here are my contact details. So feel free to WhatsApp me if you have questions. Here's my email address. And thank you guys so much. I'm gonna spend a little bit of time just kind of going through some of these questions. So for those of you that want to stay on, please do. Okay. So it's a question about clean protein powders, which is a great question. So there's actually a couple about clean protein powders and examples of kind of good quality proteins. So I'll answer the protein powder first. So the protein powder, generally, when you look at the ingredients list, ideally, if it's going to be an animal-based protein, like a hydrolyzed beef protein or a whey protein powder, I want it to be grass-fed and potentially grass-fed organic. Sometimes I'll say non-GMO on them, which that can be great as well. I really love a lot of the collagen, kind of the bone broth powders that are kind of a mix of a collagen-based powder as well as a hydrolyzed beef protein or a chicken or sometimes turkey, like a poultry-based breakdown. They're very bioavailable. The collagen component of it is great for the inner lining of the gut. It's great for hair, skin, and nails. We have a lot of collagen-rich tissue in our bodies. So that can be a really good choice and very bioavailable. For those that can tolerate dairy, there's some really amazing whey protein powders out there. So those can also be a great choice. The whey protein powders are really great kind of post-workout, especially after lifting weights. That amino acid profile can be really helpful for helping build muscle, which again is a really important organ to help us with clearance of certain things, especially kind of the insulin and insulin blood sugar side of things. For the more vegetarian kind of or vegan-based protein powders, there's some really good, quite clean organic pea proteins that I will use that one a lot. There are other ones, hemp protein, we can't use it in Singapore, but potentially in other places in the world, people can use that. Depending on people, if people have issues with lectin, sometimes there's pumpkin seed proteins. There's other protein powders that are made of vegetarian sources, but the one I tend to use the most are the pea proteins. There's also like rice proteins and stuff like that. But again, if people are off of lectins, then they're usually not doing grains. The pea could also be an issue there, but I do find that most people can tolerate some pea protein, especially the clean ones. So I'm wanting organic, I'm wanting non-GMO especially. And then a good quality protein, I think when you're thinking about bioavailability and how much amino acid and the variety of amino acid you get from an individual protein source, the animal proteins win out there, but you can certainly, there are lots of good vegetarian-based proteins as well. So I'm thinking from the animal base, grass-fed organic beef, lamb, most lamb is grass-fed and organic as well, would be great there. I'm thinking of wild fish, especially the low mercury fish. I'm thinking of eggs are a really great source that a lot of vegetarians can eat. So in Singapore and Hong Kong, I love the Friends, F-R-E-N-Z, organic eggs. So really just looking for organic pasture raised. So where chickens are eating what chickens are meant to be eating. And then organic, ideally pasture raised poultry. Again, poultry where the chickens or turkeys are eating, or duck, they're eating what they're meant to be eating. Pork can also fit in there, but again, so chicken and pork can be harder to find pasture raised, but you can find it. There's especially some of the like Iberico ham or the Parma hams. You kind of want to get a sense of what those animals are eating. So you want them eating kind of what they're meant to be eating, as opposed to being fed like a corn or a soy or a grain feed. So that's what I'm thinking about when I'm thinking about good quality protein. Makeup and body products. So there's a couple of different websites. So the Goop website, Gwyneth Paltrow's website, goop.com, does a lot of clean makeup and body products. There's a website called, what is it? Credo Beauty, I think it is, something like that. CREDO Beauty. If someone has the exact name for it, maybe you can type it into the chat. But that is kind of a consolidator of clean brands. So that is a really good website that a lot of people, I like a company out of the US called Anne Marie Gianni. She does some really clean body products and face products for women. So that can be, it's Credo Beauty, CREDO Beauty, all one word.com. So that's a great, there's also someone put in here, 100% pure in Singapore is easy to get, and that's a makeup brand. So there's a number of different kind of clean beauty products. It's kind of one of the bigger growing markets, I think, like clean beauty, makeup, body products for women, because people are just realizing how much these types of products are screwing up especially our hormonal health as women. So we want to really kind of certainly empower our girls, our teenagers, our friends to start to make changes here, because it can be really impactful, because we absorb what we put in on our skin, we absorb into the body, and it has to be detoxed. There's a question here on electrolytes. So I am really partial to and love the LMNT electrolytes. Letter L, letter M, letter N, letter T. So element, but LMNT. It is a US-based electrolyte brand. If you order the bundle of buy 3, get 1 free, it's free shipping to Singapore. They get here really quickly. And they're these amazing, like you can take a sachet a day. I also use some of the high-end supplement brands I work with, like Designs for Health has a great electrolyte brand. There's a brand out of the US called Kion, Kion. They do more amino acids, but they have some really nice products. But they are a great amino acid brand. If someone doesn't want to do kind of a protein powder and just want amino acids, they make a really great amino acid product. And that can be a really good way for vegetarians or vegans to get in a more bioavailable way, because you're just taking the building blocks to get in your amino acids. There's a question here on how much protein should we be having per day, and how does it differ from person to person? Are some meats superior to others from a nutritional perspective? So I tend to, for women, try to get them to around 100 grams of protein a day. So thinking around like 30, 35 grams of protein per meal, if you're thinking 3 meals a day. So I don't have people measure stuff out. I just don't work in that way from a nutritional perspective, but there certainly are some nutritionists who do that. But just thinking about, I want kind of a decent portion of protein for each meal. And a good quality protein powder oftentimes is like 20 to 25 grams of protein. So it can really help kind of boost us up. But in general, people, I'd say especially women, tend to undereat protein. So really thinking about potentially making protein a little bit a bigger part of your meal. You don't want that kind of at the expense of everything else, of especially kind of the vegetables. So we want a good, I'm thinking of making up my plate. It's about 1/2 to 2/3 of all sorts of multicolored different types of vegetables. I'm thinking about adding in a good sized portion of protein, kind of a small to moderate portion of those good healthy carbs, and then adding in my fats, maybe dousing that plate in olive oil. I'm thinking of adding in, making maybe, nice olive oil and herb-based dressings. I can think about adding avocado or nuts and seeds, or maybe making a tahini dressing, like a sesame seed type dip that goes on top, or adding organic olives to my meal, or olive-based dip. So all of those kind of I'm adding in, but generally women are under eating protein, I'd say, as a general And as far as which meats are superior, it's really just about how they're breaking down in their amino acid profile. So again, the animal-based proteins are just more bioavailable. It's not that you can absolutely still get there, vegetarian and vegan, you just have to work a little bit harder and maybe adding in a little bit more of things like those amino acids, like those Keon amino acids, or Designs for Health makes a good one that I work with a lot. And or thinking about adding in more things like more protein powder, stuff like that. And then there's a question here about like dark meat, white meat. As far as from a protein perspective, I don't actually know the question of the answer to dark meat versus white meat. They may have a slightly different amino acid profile. They probably do. I just don't know exactly what the breakdown is there. But I think if you're eating your protein, especially if it's animal-based protein, you should be able to get there. And I think just vary it as far as like beef, lamb, chicken, fish, seafood. They can all give us slightly different nutrient profiles. So I think varying it is for a lot of people best. And that makeup brand in Singapore, I Red put in the chat box here. I don't know if you guys can all see it, but the 100% pure brand in Singapore is www, the number 100, so 100, and then spelling out percent, percent, pure, pure, so 100% pure, all one word, .com.sg. Good, so I think we will leave it there.